So it is my pleasure and honor to have invited Rachel Schulties to teach tonight, to offer her words of Torah. Rachel is in leadership at the synagogue. Know her in part for her work with communications with us. And also Rachel and Mike are the very proud parents of Jacob and Abby, and who you've definitely seen here on Zoom Shabbats, but also around the synagogue. And I'm gonna actually leave it there and let Rachel speak for herself and share her story and her Torah with you. But Rachel, don't start yet. We have to find you. So I think, oh, there you are. Are you unmuted? Can we hear you? I think I have to unmute you. Okay.
Okay. You can hear me?
We can.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom. If we don't know each other, my name is Rachel Schulties. My children, Jacob and Abigail, are both active young members of this congregation. And my husband, Mike, is a stay-at-home dad / woodworker. And our family did not come to be in the traditional sense, but then again, what's traditional these days? Mike is from a rural town in southern Delaware where poverty and racism are common. I'm from Fairlawn, land of the Jews in New Jersey, and really was sheltered about what it meant to live as a minority until I went to college. We met at the University of Delaware, which is an interesting combination of New York metro area students and Delaware natives. In many ways, Mike and I couldn't be more different if we tried. Mike started his career as a teacher at Eastside High School a few years after we relocated to New Jersey. Of course, he wanted to teach, but more importantly, he wanted to provide a sense of guidance to kids that did not receive that at home. This was a passion of his, as he did not have a strong direction on how to navigate his own future or higher education because of his own family's inexperience and lack of exposure. This interest, fully supporting a commitment to education and the dreams of his students, quickly grew into much more for him. The time and dedication he gave to his students and their futures was initially very frustrating to me, especially when we were trying to start our own family. They had access to him on a level that I never had with any teacher ever. They would call our home. He would help them buy their school supplies. He became a true fixture in their lives, and nothing was off limits to him. When people would ask where he taught, we would hear a lot of comments like, oh, the school from Lean On Me, or are there gangs? I didn't always know this, but I do know now that this is part of what continues to fuel systemic. Sorry. My daughter was getting a kid's messenger call. As the years went on, we focused on our own family. Jacob is our first child, and then we wanted to have a second. After struggling to conceive, we decided to adopt. Our path led us to American Adoptions, a private agency that supports domestic infant adoption. During the process, we had to discuss some very important and real topics. What medical history were we comfortable with our birth mother or birth father having? What race child were we open to adopting? Did we have a gender preference? We filled out over 20 pages of questions and criteria. Throughout the adoption process, there are many fees and costs associated with lawyers, social workers, supporting the birth mother during pregnancy, and this we were aware of and prepared to take on. What we were not prepared for was that there was a premium if we wanted to adopt a white child. The costs aren't different for the lawyers. The birth mother needs the same, but the agency could demand a higher rate just because the baby was white. I think that this was my first experience with overt racism. A white baby was deemed more valuable than a Black baby. As we discussed these questions together, I remember digging deep and asking Mike, is it responsible for us to adopt a Black boy and bring him into a town like Wyckoff? I just kept thinking about Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old boy shot twice by a neighborhood watch volunteer for walking in his own neighborhood. Could that be my son? This notion terrified me, and Mike felt very strongly that we should be open to any and all race or gender. I agreed, but definitely remained fearful. Abigail joined our family in November 2014, and immediately we were exposed to racism in a way I had never expected. People would look at her and say, what is she? Where did she come from? Some would say she wasn't Black enough. Some would say she was too Black. But the worst of it all was people telling us how amazing we were for saving her. Saving her from what exactly? Abigail's birth mother is an incredible young woman who I think of as a sister in a way. We are very close, and she is absolutely a part of raising Abigail. We talk to her often, and Abby has a relationship with her and her 3 children, Abby's brothers and sister. I'm disturbed by the number of times over the past 5 years that we've been told how wonderful we are for saving Abby. I accepted Rabbi Steiner's invitation to speak tonight because I want to help everyone understand fully that racism can take many forms. We are all familiar with the idea of overt racism. This is explicit hatred toward Black people. This comes in the form of a racial slur or a white supremacist rally. But the microaggressions that take place every day are what hurts our society the most. These are subtle forms of racism that most people would say are not racist at all. But I'm here to tell you, they are. They can range from, can I touch your hair, to all lives matter, not just Black lives. Discrimination, no matter how subtle, can have detrimental consequences. What I ask of you as our community and our family is that you recognize these microaggressions and challenge them. When you challenge people with privilege because of skin color or socioeconomic status, they may ignore what you're saying or tell you you're being too sensitive. Please continue to engage in these conversations. The only way we shift the mindset of people around us is to continuously point out when these things are said. Be open to hearing the same feedback when it's given to you, and change the way you speak and behave. That is what will drive systemic change over time. Not being racist is not enough. We have to drive change in a society that has ignored microaggressions for a lifetime. Some of you may be thinking, does this really happen today? Or this can't happen in our town or our community. But just this past week, my family was faced with an overt racist incident right here in Wyckoff. On a local Facebook group, several members expressed frustration as to why a Black Lives Matter peaceful protest was permitted to happen when their children were not allowed to have their graduation ceremonies due to the pandemic. Let me ask you, is a graduation ceremony really equivalent to a life of injustice? My husband responded to this thread expressing that he was so encouraged to see this protest in our community and thankful that people we live amongst are using their privilege to drive awareness and change. Immediately, he received responses from several group members expressing that if he wanted to fight racism, he should have chosen to live in a different community and that he should move to MLK Boulevard or Straight Street in Patterson. The conversation continued to attack his assimilation into suburbia, commenting on the value of our home and the fact that we drive a minivan, which apparently is a symbol of suburban lifestyle. Ultimately, both Michael and I were removed from the group by the moderator, who was one of the worst offenders in this conversation. Our personal tribe has been overwhelmingly supportive over the last few days, and we thank you all for that. We've provided a similar response to each person we speak with. Please don't be sorry for what happened. Speak up in defense of Black and brown people everywhere when you witness it. Challenge the status quo. So how do you challenge these situations? This is the hardest part. I understand the fear of confrontation. It's often, if not always, uncomfortable. But we need to move through the discomfort and engage anyway. Here are a few ideas of what you can say. I know you didn't realize this, but when you ask her if you can touch her hair, it makes her uncomfortable because this is not a question that would ever be asked to a white person. Instead, tell her you love her curls. Or, I noticed that you said all lives matter in response to that Facebook post. I used to do that too, but then I learned that saying Black Lives Matter is not implying other lives don't matter. It's lifting up and calling attention to the fundamental right to save a life. Full life for people with Black and brown skin who walk around with fear for their own lives when others do not. Rabbi Steiner shared with me a rabbinic teaching from the Midrash on Psalms. We learn that when a person makes their way in the world, a retinue of angels walks before them and proclaims, "Make way for an icon of the Blessed Holy One." Today, right now, we embrace this text in a particular light. When a Black or brown person makes their way in the world, we, as white people with privilege, have the opportunity, and most importantly, the obligation to be that surrounding circle. We proclaim, make way for our Black and brown friends, family, neighbors, and citizens who are living embodiments of the Holy One, sovereign visual representations of God. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. insisted, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice.